Greetings once again, fellow skeptics and lovers of Western culture, in a way that's definitely not racist, to my inner sanctum of knowledge, where I speak incredibly pretentiously to you, my audience, about the cultural Marxists, feminists and leftist degenerates ruining your favourite movies, TV shows and video games by putting gays, blacks and women with small tits in them, which, as I mentioned in the 42 videos I uploaded crying about Brie Larson, the 95 about the oppression of Kumas the game industry has been pushing by taking away our beloved big boobs for realism, and the 5 I uploaded just yesterday about the fact that a fictional man in a zombie game gets killed by a fictional muscular woman, and because I'm a fucking idiot and I've never seen a muscular woman, I'm just going to pretend that she's a trans woman based on literally zero evidence. Usually on a Thursday I would, rather than talk about movies or games for children, talk about superhero comic books, a genre entirely designed for adults pushing 40 like me, and the fact that I simultaneously get upset when my favourite comics publisher tries to appeal to other demographics in a desperate attempt to stop their own decline, while simultaneously blaming said decline on the measures they're taking to avoid it, is totally normal and not in any way incredibly counterproductive and actively harming the art and industry I claim to care about. Today, however, rather than that, I want to jerk my dick raw out of pure hatred over some utterly innocuous faux intellectual bullshit that I fundamentally don't understand because I haven't bothered to do literally any research in this 20-minute long video in which I talk about what I reckon movies should be like, by which I mean populated exclusively by cis-het white people who support 100% of my outdated ideas on what gender roles should be, whilst completely misunderstanding the most basic fundamentals of film theory. Oh, and I'll probably cry over the fact that I didn't come once whilst watching Avengers Endgame because of the SJWs. That's right, we're talking about the hero's journey because it's all I know about film theory, so fuck it, let's not bother doing any more research before shitting out a pretentious, misinformed screed about it. What do you want from me? Nuance?
Is it water with the sheep in the box?
Sorry about that, everyone, I just couldn't resist. Just a short one again for you today because there's something I needed to get off my chest, but I didn't really want to write 10,000 words on a topic that's basically entirely agreed upon in the academic community. Namely, I wanted to address a tendency I've been seeing crop up a lot in the right-wing media criticism YouTube sphere, which is a pretty wild place at the best of times, judging by the way that a simple assertion of what should be an obvious philosophical statement, such as art is subjective, prompted hours and hours worth of content and, of course, beef, because these people are incapable of having reasonable discussions or debunking someone else's point in anything less than 5 hours of livestream, during which they attack, use ableist slurs and misgender an autistic trans woman, and sometimes feel the need to spend 12 hours failing to own someone online because she didn't like a movie they enjoyed. That, of course, being the art of story structure, and the strange tendency for many of these self-important dipshits to read about the 3-act structure and the hero's journey online, specifically how it relates to Star Wars and George Lucas's writing philosophy, and declare that any and all stories that do not adhere to it are in some way doing it wrong, sometimes with the caveat that this only refers to blockbusters, especially the modern Star Wars movies. The problem, of course, is that models like the 3-act structure and the hero's journey are not really templates for how a story should be, but are in fact ways of describing, analysing and categorising stories after the fact. In short, they are a tool of literary analysis, not an essential part of storytelling like coherent characters or a central premise, although even that can be debated, but I'll leave that kind of abstract discussion of art to Patricia Taxon because it's quite a way out of my wheelhouse. And as a result, saying shit like this...
These heroes, this hero's journey, it's not a cliche. It is not a tired formula that somebody just thought of one time. It's human experience. You cannot get away from it. It is buried so deeply in your psyche. This is what resonates with people like nothing else. So this push today by so many people from a leftist ideology to disregard the hero's journey, to disregard this idea of archetypes. In academia, it's considered passé because everything the modern hip academic believes should be socially constructed. There's no such thing as an essential anything. In fact, if you believe that there is an essential ideal anything, then you are a dreaded essentialist, and guess what you might as well be if you're an essentialist? Bum bum bum, Hitler, the SJW's favorite little boogeyman to trot out and try to silence all arguments against them with. And they're trying to do this. This has trickled down from academia, and now it's permeated into entertainment industries, and we see this in our filmmakers and comic creators and everything. They are trying their best now to dissolve the hero's journey. This is what Rian Johnson said he wanted to do with The Last Jedi, to subvert your expectations. That's not just your personal expectations. He wanted to take that formula, that basic human experience of the hero's journey, and be the brilliant mastermind who was going to subvert it. Well, all he did was piss people off, and he made a film that no matter how vocally this little pocket of people want to claim they loved it, it will never go down in history as a classic, because it did not follow the hero's journey, and therefore it will not resonate with people. Long after today's little in vogue social agendas, no one's going to even care about the movie because it does not resonate. And it doesn't resonate because it doesn't follow the hero's journey.
Can come across as fundamentally misunderstanding the relationship between story structure, storytelling, criticism, and analysis. And also, this guy's banner image is a fucking Bitmoji. It may interest you to know that there are in fact several different models and conflicting methods of analysis of media, and the fact that the 3-act structure and the hero's journey are the ones we in the West are most familiar with is mostly due to the fact that modern blockbusters are structured extremely similarly and, above all, simply, because they exist to be as simple and digestible as possible, further compounded by the fact that most of these YouTube rantsona movie critics appear to exclusively consume mainstream superhero media, lowest common denominator pulpy action novels, and, yes, Hollywood blockbusters, despite maintaining the air of a connoisseur of highbrow media and literature. Not that there's anything wrong with enjoying those things, of course. Not every movie can be a Tokyo Story or Ladybird, and I've spent a lot of time on this channel talking about Star Wars and Harry Potter, so I'm definitely not immune to this. But if you're not curious or interested enough in a variety of different approaches to the art form outside of basic, bland Hollywood blockbuster shite, and especially if your only interaction with storytelling appears to be watching superhero movies and reading comic books, then sorry, but your opinion on what storytelling should be like, or even what a superhero or Star Wars movie should be like, is at best not considering art that falls outside of whatever's popular right now, and at worst suggesting that all art that doesn't conform to the exact structure of a Star Wars movie or whatever the fuck Disney movie they remake whilst losing almost all the elements that people liked about the original is wrong, because it ignores not only the ideal but the only valid way to structure a story. Let's go over just some of the other models of story structure, shall we? First off, all the way back in the 4th century BCE, Aristotle believed that a play should have 2 acts, the complication and the unravelling. A couple of hundred years later, Roman poet Horace wrote that a play should not be shorter or longer than 5 acts, and in fact it wasn't until the 4th century AD that the 3-act structure, which was later repopularized by Sid Field in 1979, was suggested by Aelius Donatus, a Roman grammarian, which was apparently a job back then, with the 3 acts in question being protasis, epitasis, and catastrophe. It took until 1863 for any kind of comprehensive attempt to categorize and analyze these stories by identifying the number of acts would arise again in the form of Gustav Freytag in Die Technik des Dramas, a study of the 5-act dramatic structure in which he laid out what has come to be known as Freytag's pyramid, which was split into 5 distinct parts, as the diagram on screen shows. So we have exposition, originally called introduction, rising action or rise, climax, falling action, return or fall, and finally catastrophe, denouement, resolution or revelation. Of course, the fields of literary analysis and dramatic structure didn't end in 1979, and since then a number of competing theories have coexisted and all been used to varying degrees to, well, analyze and describe dramatic structure within a text, including Northrop Frye's U-shaped model, in which comedies are structured in this sort of U-shape here, and tragedies by comparison are structured in the exact opposite manner in this inverted U-shape. Frye's model was originally created to analyze various biblical stories, but has been used on other texts as well. And this is only in Western literature. There are other examples in different cultures, like the Japanese art of Johakyu, for example, which is very complex, but for our purpose today, is a philosophy that begot another kind of 5-act structure consisting of love, warriors and battles, pathos and tragedy, journey and conclusion. Or how about Kisho Tenkutsu, which was widely used throughout classic Chinese, Japanese and Korean literature, and in essence is a 4-act structure consisting of introduction, development, twist, and conclusion. The fact of the matter is that much like attitudes towards nebulous concepts like race, class, gender, sexuality, and so on, humans' views of art varies not only throughout time, but from culture to culture as well. Likewise, the hero's journey, or monomyth, rather than being the only way a good story can be structured, is a model used to analyze and describe various works of art that fall broadly within the genre of adventure, fantasy, chosen one, or heroic fiction. In short, it's an academic academic framework which can be used to more easily discuss and talk about works such as ancient mythology and fairy tales, which is why it's called the Monomyth. There's a reason why some of the important steps on the hero's journey are called things like Gift of the Goddess, Supernatural Aid, and Threshold Guardian, because most ancient mythology did fall into this exact kind of framework. But regardless, despite its name, the Monomyth doesn't necessarily apply to all ancient literature by any stretch, and there are some significant outliers, just as there are today. Try fitting most biblical stories or pulp fiction into it and you may struggle. Oh, and also Joseph Campbell was once asked how female protagonists fit into the hero's journey, and he said that they don't because they are not the hero, they are the goal, the prize at the end of the journey, so I guess he just never considered that some stories might have a female hero. It is definitely possible to reverse engineer the perfect digestible standard story by using both the 3-act structure and the Monomyth to construct a very simple adventure story that hits every single one of the beats at the exact point that the models suggest, and that kind of story definitely has its place, but this isn't the norm. It's not the optimal method for creating stories, discourages creativity in a lot of ways, and if you want to tell a more complex story or have a more complex narrative than good guy is special, goes on adventure, defeats bad guy, then this model is unlikely to fit very neatly onto your story. And this is without getting into the philosophical implications of a majority of mainstream media being about special people who are chosen by fate to do great things, leading to a culture that venerates and wholeheartedly accepts the myth that the world is changed or improved primarily by individuals rather than the collective. We can see this by simply reading the history books. The Second World War was won due to the brave and righteous actions of Winston Churchill, but let's ignore his legacy in India because that might affect the narrative, and his epic mind battle with Hitler, reducing the conflict down to a couple of world leaders while ignoring the wider context. The British soldiers, codebreakers, spies and so on, and the SS officers committing atrocities were just as, if not more, responsible for the victory of the Allies and the crimes of the Third Reich respectively, but that's rarely how it's framed. This concept of so-called great man history is, in my opinion, inherently misleading, and I would argue stems, at least in part, from centuries of stories revolving around singular great chosen ones, which in modern times usually means superheroes, with the rest of society unable to effect great change without them, thus reinforcing a belief in ruthless individualism. Everyone wants to be the hero, and what kind of story involves the people banding together to demand things change? When has that ever helped anyone in fairy tales? Just real life, but who needs that? That's a whole other kind of worms I'll maybe open some other day, but for now, we're done talking about this.
Yeah, you know what it is. Black and yellow, black and yellow, black and yellow, black and yellow.
If any right-wing YouTubers who think that they're really cool and badass with their incredibly cringe-worthy rantsonas and dramatic voices are watching this video, which considering how thin-skinned they are and have demonstrated themselves to be on multiple occasions, I would invite you to consume a wider variety of media, do some reading up on concepts like dramatic structure and models designed for media analysis, and above all, stop fucking using Star Wars as your benchmark for what storytelling can or should be. Open your mind to new and different things, and I promise you that your ability to accurately critique Marvel movies for 5 hours at a time will improve, and you can introduce different frameworks into your analysis and actually look like you have a fucking clue what you're talking about in your video, in which you whine about SJWs ruining Hollywood for the 57th fucking time this month, because it's still 2016 apparently.
You're saying that humans need fantasies to make life bearable?
No. Humans need fantasy to be human. To be the place where the falling angel meets the rising ape.
With tooth fairies, hogfathers.
Yes, that's practice. You have to start out learning to believe the little lies.
So we can believe the big ones?
Yes, justice, mercy, duty, that sort of thing.
They're not the same at all.
You think so? Then take the universe and grind it down to the finest powder and sieve it through the finest sieve, and then show me one atom of justice, one molecule of mercy. And yet, you try to act as if there is some ideal order in the world, as if there is some rightness in the universe by which it may be judged.
But people have got to believe that. What's the point?
You need to believe in things that aren't true. How else can they become?
hello everyone. That was, as I said, a much shorter one. I just had to get that off my chest, really. I may do another video about this with regards to film theory and film analysis, but this is just something I've seen crop up again and again whilst researching these right-wing numbskulls, so I thought I'd just get my thoughts out there on the subject. Anyway, this is a much shorter video. However, as always, as promised, I do just want to thank my patrons, whose names are being displayed on screen right now. If you do want to join them, there will be a link in the video description. If you donate $5 or more, I will read your name out over the credits of every video, and you do get access to most videos a couple of days early as well. So today, I especially want to thank Calliope, Chris Vagnacci, Emily, Epfrey Jeffstein, Nanza Kambe. Next we have Brian, Pixels Green, Stacey Solano, Susie M, Theodore Pekelarov, Thomas McCallum, Tom Newport, and Wickerbitch. Thanks so much for listening, everyone, and I'll hopefully see you soon. Bye!